Hi everybody, I'm Lydia. I'm a community coordinator here at Goulet. I am also the only lefty on the team. So this is a new series that we're bringing called Left Out. Basically the point of this series is to just bring some education to lefty fountain pen users and basically show you that writing with fountain pens isn't quite so scary. Just a word for you guys, this is all my opinion. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this is what's going to be the best for you, but I'm hoping that it gives you a great place to start in your fountain pen journey. So I got it started in fountain pens when I came here to Goulet. Before that, I had never ever in my life touched a fountain pen. I had no idea what they were kind of scary. Everybody always told me that they just spilled ink everywhere, so I pretty much stayed away from them. In school I used pencils and I used ballpoint pens and I smudged them all the time, like all the time. So for me, writing was never something that was enjoyable. But then I got here to Goulet and I got my first fountain pens and it was like a whole new world for me. So my first pen was actually a Pilot Metropolitan and I have it right here. So this was my first pen and it was just such a joy for me to write because it flows so smoothly and the nib was just fine enough that I could get used to writing with wetter inks without having to worry about smudging. Another thing that I noticed when I first started with my pens is that I just naturally tended to write underneath the line. All the time that I used pencils and roller balls and ballpoints and all that, I was a side writer and I was smudging my writing. But for some reason, just having the fountain pen and writing with the nib perpendicular to my line seemed natural to me. So that was a pretty easy transition for me. So you may have heard me mention SIDEWRITER, UNDERWRITER, and those terms might be a little confusing. So let me explain to you the three different types of lefty writers. First, you have the underwriter, that's me. So these people are writing underneath the line that they're trying to write on, and they tend to have the least problems when it comes to finding the right pen, finding the right ink, and finding the right paper. The second style that you'll find is the side writer. So these people hold their pens to the side of the line that they're writing on, and they tend to have the most issues with smudging or finding the right ink to keep them from smudging. They may also have issues with the push motion that lefties use when we're writing. When a righty is using their pen, they're actually pulling it across the page, so they don't have a lot of surface tension, they don't have a lot of issues when it comes to the pen skipping or flowing the right way, but side writers are pushing into the line, so they have a bit more of an issue finding the right nib for them, finding the right ink that's going to flow well without being a smudging issue. So to fix the side writer smudging issue, some of the tips that I suggest would be turning your paper. So when you're writing, it encourages you to stay off the line that you're writing on. Or you can also try teaching yourself to be an underwriter. So actually moving your hand down and trying to train yourself to write underneath the line. Some other tips you can try is a more absorbent paper or even a drier ink, like say the Pelikan 4001 inks or a Lamy ink. Those seem to work really well for me when I'm looking for a drier ink. The third style, that would be the overwriter. So the overwriters are actually writing above the line that they're writing on. And you'll have to pardon me, I'm not an overwriter, so it's not as natural to me. But these people are actually holding their pens above the line that they're writing on. And they almost seem to mimic righties in the way that they're writing, except they're coming at it from the opposite angle, so they're over top of their writing. And overwriters can also have an issue with smudging if they're not careful. But the easiest way to fix those issues is to just change your angle or try and hold your pen a little higher up. So fixing those issues isn't quite as difficult as, say, like a side writer with a smudging issue. So here's a couple tips I have for my fellow lefty fountain pen users that might help you actually enjoy your pens a little more. So the first tip I have for you, as I mentioned, try a finer nib. I found that using finer nibs allows me to use any of the inks that I find intriguing and colorful without having to worry so much about the smudging. Another tip I can give you is to try using a drier ink in your broader nibs. So if you're like me and you enjoy a wetter nib, such as the one I have on my Edison, so this is a medium, but I filled it with a drier ink that will help reduce the smudging for me. So I can still use the wetter nib, but have a drier ink in it. The third tip I have for you is to try a more absorbent paper. So for example, using like a Lloyd-Strump paper would help substantially with the absorbency of the ink into the paper, and will also help reduce your smudging because there's not as much wet ink sitting on the top of the page. The final tip I have for you is to just enjoy it. Have fun. Take the practice time that you need to get used to your pens and enjoy the journey, because that's what fountain pen use is. It's a journey. You're like going down the rabbit hole, exploring all these new inks, exploring these pens, and really you just have to have fun with it. If you can find a pen that you love and find an ink that works for you, just practice. Take your pen, start doodling. That's how I started. I used my pens to like write notes during meetings, but I also just picked up my pen randomly and started drawing, and that really helped me get a feel for the pen and get used to the way the ink flows out of it. You may find a pen that works for you when you're drawing and one that you enjoy for writing. You really just have to enjoy the journey and try out a bunch of pens, and don't be afraid to jump out of your comfort zone. On the next episode of Left Out, we're going to talk about flex and stub nibs and how lefties can use those pens. If you have any feedback from this episode or any tips you want to share with fellow lefties, feel free to leave those in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. This is Lydia signing off.